The emergency lights cast long shadows across the sterile corridors of Research Station Omega-7, their red glow pulsing like a heartbeat in the darkness. Dr. Maria. Rodriguez's footsteps echoed against the metal flooring as she approached the most secure containment facility in human space. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her tablet, playing readings that still made no sense after 3 days of analysis. The containment cell hummed with electromagnetic barriers. Gasting? An eerie blue glow across the metallic walls. Inside, a creature unlike anything in human xenobiology databases sat motionless on the floor. Its elongated limbs were folded in an almost meditative pose. 6 eyes arranged symmetrically across its angular skull, each one tracking the movements of the guards beyond the barrier with an intelligence that made Maria's skin crawl. Status report, she whispered to Lieutenant Sarah Davis, who stood guard at the observation window. No movement for the past 6 hours, Doctor. It just watches, like it's studying us instead of the other way around. Sarah's voice carried an edge of unease that Maria had never heard from the usually composed officer. Maria nodded. Her throat dry. The creature had been captured during the failed assault on New Geneva, the only survivor of what intelligence reports called a reconnaissance force. But looking at it now, Maria wondered if they had truly captured it, or if it had allowed itself to be taken. The thought sent ice through her veins. She approached the cell with measured steps, tablet displaying preliminary scans of the being they designated as Subject X-47. The readings were impossible. Its cellular structure defied every law of biology she knew, and its energy signature suggested a metabolism that could sustain life for centuries, maybe longer. Can you understand me? Maria asked. Her voice transmitted through the cell's communication system. The alien's head tilted slightly. When it spoke, its voice carried an unexpected musical quality that seemed to resonate in harmonics human ears weren't designed to process. The sound made her teeth ache, and her vision blur momentarily. I understand your words, human. But do you understand what you have done? Maria felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't the first contact protocol she'd studied for 20 years. This was something else entirely. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about intelligence, about communication, about the very nature of consciousness itself. What is your designation? Your rank? She managed to ask, fighting to keep her voice steady. The creature's 6 eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her want to step back. But she held her ground, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. I am Vexstar, of the 7th Tide, scout warrior of the hegemony. The creature's eyes never blinked, never wavered. And you are the species that should not exist. Before Maria could respond, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Colonel James Mitchell stepped forward from the shadows, his weathered face hard with barely contained anger. His hand rested on his sidearm, knuckles white with tension. You're in no position to make threats, alien. Vexstar's gaze shifted to James, and something that might have been amusement flickered across its features. The expression was so human-like that Maria felt her breath catch. Threat? No, Colonel. This is a warning. A warning about what? James demanded, his voice rising. Your people attacked our colonies, killed thousands of innocent civilians. You want to warn us? Here's my warning, cooperate, or spend the rest of your unnaturally long life in this cell. The alien's form seemed to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on everyone in the room. You misunderstand, Colonel Mitchell. I did not come here to threaten you. I came here to understand how you defeated us. The silence that followed was deafening. Maria felt her heart hammering against her ribs as the implications hit her. Defeated you? But we barely survived the assault on New Geneva. Our casualties were irrelevant, Vexter interrupted. Its 6 eyes now fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel like a specimen under a microscope. You survived. That alone is impossible. James stepped closer to the barrier, his anger transforming into something darker. Impossible. We're still here, aren't we? Still breathing? Still fighting? Now that's what humans do. Yes, Vexter said. And for the first time, Maria heard something like fear in its voice. That is exactly what you do, and that is why you terrify us. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Maria found herself leaning forward, drawn by the alien's words, despite every rational part of her mind telling her to maintain distance. What do you mean? It's in 17 star systems. Across 43 worlds, we have brought order to chaos. Every species we have encountered has followed the same pattern. They resist, they adapt to a point, then they submit, or they die. It is the natural order of things. Vexstar's form seemed to shrink inward. You did neither. Maybe you just picked the wrong species to mess with, James said, but his bravado sounded forced now. Perhaps, Vexstar agreed. But that raises a question that has haunted my people since our first encounter with your kind. If you are capable of such, innovation, under pressure, what else might you be capable of? Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. You're not just studying us for military intelligence, are you? You're trying to understand what we are? What you are, Vexter repeated, is a species that should have been extinct long before you developed interstellar travel. Your homeworld is a death trap. Your solar system is unstable. Your bodies are fragile. Your lifespan's brief. By every metric we use to measure survivability, you should have died out millions of years ago. But we didn't, Maria said quietly. No. You became something we have never encountered before. You became survivors who refused to accept the limits of survival. Vexstar's eyes seemed to glow brighter in the blue light, and that makes you the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Words hung in the air, like a physical presence. Maria realized that her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from a growing understanding of what this creature was really telling them. They weren't just prisoners of war having a conversation. They were witnessing the confession of a species that had discovered something about humanity that humans themselves didn't fully understand. What happens now? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Vexstar's form seemed to coil with sudden tension. Now, Dr. Rodriguez, I tell you why the hegemony is called for a full retreat from human space. And why that? Retreat may be the greatest tactical error in our civilization's history. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to sound. Maria's tablet chimed with an incoming priority message, but she couldn't look away from the alien's 6 eyes. Something was about to change everything. She could feel it in her bones. Just like the power of compounding transforms small investments into massive wealth over time. The small acts of human defiance were about to compound into something that would reshape the galaxy forever. The coffee in Maria's mug had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. For 3 days straight, she had found herself drawn back to the containment cell like a moth to flame. Sleep eluded her. Food tasted like ash. And her dreams were filled with 6 unblinking eyes that seemed to peer directly into her soul. Over. The following days, Maria found herself drawn back to the cell, compelled by Vexstar's cryptic statements. The alien seemed almost eager to talk, as if carrying a burden too heavy for silence. Each conversation peeled back another layer of something vast and terrifying. Something that made her question everything she thought she knew about humanity's place in the universe. James remained skeptical, pacing like a caged predator during each session. His boots wore a path in the metal flooring as he circled the observation area, his military instincts screaming that they were being manipulated. "This thing is playing us," he muttered for the 10th time. "Everything it says is designed to get inside our heads." "Maybe," Maria replied, not taking her eyes off the alien. But what if it's not? What if it's telling us the truth? The truth. James stopped pacing and stared at her. The truth is that its people tried to wipe us out. Everything else is just psychological warfare. But Maria wasn't so sure. There was something in Vexstar's posture, in the way its voice carried what she was beginning to recognize as genuine distress. That suggested this was more than manipulation. This was confession. "Your species confuses us," Vexstar said during their 3rd session, its 6 eyes tracking James's restless movement. "We have conquered 17 star systems, subjugated 43 species. All followed the natural order. The strong dominated the weak. The advanced crushed the primitive. The alien's words hung in the air like a challenge. Maria felt her pulse quicken. Here was confirmation of what humanity had always feared. They were not alone in the universe. And they were not the apex predators they had imagined themselves to be. Maria leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. But humans are different. Humans are ... wrong. Vextar's voice carried what Maria was beginning to recognize as distress. Its form seemed to ripple with an emotion that might have been frustration, or perhaps something deeper. We came to your world expecting easy victory. Your technology was inferior, your body's fragile, your lifespan's brief. By every metric, you should have surrendered within cycles. The alien paused, and in that silence, Maria could hear the hum of the station's life support systems. The distant chatter of personnel going about their duties, the steady thrum of engines that kept them anchored in space. Normal sounds of a normal day, except nothing about this conversation was normal. But we didn't, James growled, his fists clenched. His anger was palpable, radiating from him like heat from a furnace. We don't know how to quit. No. Vextar. Six eyes seemed to dim, as if the alien was looking inward at memories it would rather forget. You did something no species has ever done. You adapted. In the span of a single solar rotation, your military doctrine evolved. Your soldiers began using our own weapons against us, modified with techniques we hadn't considered in millennia. Of warfare? Maria felt a surge of pride swell in her chest. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to overcome, to find a way forward when there seemed to be no path. But Vextar's next words chilled her to the bone. That was only the beginning of the horror. The word horror seemed to echo in the containment cell. Maria found herself leaning back, suddenly aware of how close she had gotten to the barrier. What do you mean by horror? You want to know what horror looks like to a species that has conquered half the galaxy? Vextar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper.
Ow.
It looks like a human soldier with a plasma burn through his chest, still advancing on your position. It looks like a human pilot ramming her crippled fighter into a capital ship rather than ejecting to safety. It looks like an entire human colony that chooses to detonate their own fusion reactors rather than surrender. James stopped pacing. Even his skepticism couldn't shield him from the raw emotion in the alien's voice.
You're talking about the Battle of Kepler Prime? Among others, Vextar confirmed. We have recordings of your communications from that.
Engagement. Would you like to hear what your people said as they chose annihilation over surrender? No, Maria said quickly, but she wasn't sure if she meant it. Part of her, the scientist part, wanted to know everything. The human part wasn't sure she could handle the truth. They said, if we're going to die, we're taking you with us. And then they did. Vextar's form seemed to coil inward. This is not rational behavior. This is not how evolution works. Species that make such choices should not survive to develop interstellar travel. Maybe that's exactly why we did, James said, his voice thoughtful now. Maybe the universe needed something irrational. Before Vextar could respond, the station's alert klaxons began blaring. The containment cell's lights flickered as emergency. Power systems activated. Maria's tablet chimed with incoming priority alerts. But she couldn't look away from the alien. Captain Lisa Thompson burst through the door, her face flushed with urgency. Colonel, we've got movement on the outer perimeter. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration. James's eyes narrowed, his military training taking over. How many hundreds, sir? They're not responding to hails? Lisa's voice carried the controlled panic of someone trying to maintain professionalism while delivering catastrophic news. Maria felt her heart sink. They're here for him. Vextar's form seemed to coil with sudden tension. They come for me. The admission sent a chill through the room. James grabbed his sidearm, his face hard with determination. Well, they can't have you. Not until we get answers. You misunderstand, Vextar said, its 6 eyes now glowing brighter in the emergency lighting. They do not come to rescue me. They come to ensure I do not reveal more than I already have. The implications hit Maria like a physical blow. There. Going to kill you? Yes, and everyone on this station who has heard what I have told you. Vextar's voice carried an odd note of regret. I had hoped to have more time to explain, to help you understand what you truly are and what that means. For the galaxy, The station shuddered as something massive impacted the outer hull. Through the observation windows, Maria could see the distant flicker of energy weapons fire. The rescue fleet, if that's what it was, had arrived with overwhelming force. "How long do we have?" James demanded. "Not long," Vexstar replied. "Perhaps long enough for you to understand why your species terrifies us. Why the hegemony has called for a full retreat from human space. And why that retreat may be the greatest tactical error in our civilization's history." Another impact rocked the station, and Maria realized that they were about to learn whether humanity's reputation for impossible victories was earned or simply legend. The next few hours would determine not just their fate, but possibly the fate of both species. Just like how compound interest starts small, but grows into something unstoppable over time. Humanity's small acts of defiance were about to compound into something that would reshape the balance of power across the galaxy. The station groaned under the assault, metal bulkheads straining against forces they were never designed to withstand. Emergency lights bathed everything in a hellish red glow, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. Maria's hands trembled as she gripped her recorder, but her voice remained steady. She had come too far to let fear stop her. "Now, tell me about the horror," Maria demanded, her recorder capturing every word as alarms began blaring throughout the station. Vexstar's form seemed to shrink inward, as if the memories themselves were physically pressing down on the alien. Its 6 eyes dimmed to barely visible points of light, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of trauma that transcended species barriers. "The first human I encountered in combat was a female soldier, designation unknown. She had been wounded what should have been a fatal plasma burn across her torso. By our understanding, she should have died within moments." Maria felt her breath catch. She had read the casualty reports from the early battles, seen the clinical descriptions of plasma weapons and their devastating effects on human tissue. But hearing it from the perspective of the one who had witnessed it made it real in a way that statistics never could. "But she didn't." She smiled at me. Vexstar's voice cracked, and Maria realized she was witnessing something unprecedented. Alien warrior reliving his worst nightmare. Through the pain, through what we calculated as certain death, she smiled. Then she detonated an explosive device, sacrificing herself to eliminate my entire squad. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant rumble of weapons fire and the hiss of emergency systems. Maria found herself holding her breath, trying to process what she had just heard. This was incomprehensible. No rational species chooses certain death over possible survival. Vexstar's form rippled with what Maria now recognized as the alien, equivalent of a shudder. In our experience, wounded beings seek healing, cornered beings seek escape. Facing superior odds, rational beings surrender. This human did none of these things. Through the station's speakers, Lieutenant Mike Davis's voice crackled with fear and excitement. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, all hands to battle stations." The announcement sent a chill through Maria's spine, but she forced herself to remain focused. This might be their last chance to understand what was happening, and she refused to waste it on panic. "You know what the funny thing is?" James said, his voice tight with dark humor. "We probably would have called her a hero, posthumously, of course." "Hero," Vexstar repeated the word as if tasting something bitter. "Yes, your species has many words for those who choose death over defeat. We have none." Maria remained focused on the alien, sensing there was more. The pieces of a larger puzzle were falling into place, and she needed to see the complete picture. What changed her perspective? The Battle of Kepler Station. We had cornered a group of human civilians non-combatants. We believed, children, elderly, the weak. We expected surrender. Vexstar's eyes closed, and Maria realized the alien was trying to block out the memory. Instead, they fought with improvised weapons, turning their own technology against us. A human child, no older than our own hatchlings, disabled 3 of our combat mechs with nothing but salvaged components and determination. The implications hit Maria like a physical blow. A child, 12 years old, according to the records we recovered later. She had turned a household cleaning unit into an electromagnetic pulse device. Our mech shielding was designed to deflect military-grade weapons, not repurpose domestic appliances. Vexstar's voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration. The tactical brilliance was ... disturbing. The lights flickered as the station's defense systems powered up. The hum of charging weapons filled the air, and Maria could feel the vibration through the deck plates. James grabbed his sidearm, his military instincts taking over. "We need to move now." "Wait," Maria said, her voice tight with urgency. "There's more. Tell me about their strategy." Vexstar looked up at her with something resembling respect. "Even now, facing certain death, you seek knowledge. This is why we fear you." Another explosion rocked the station, and Maria had to grip the observation rail to keep from falling. But she didn't move away from the containment cell. She couldn't. Not when she was so close to understanding something that could change everything. "Fear us how?" she pressed. "Because you learn from everything. Every defeat teaches you something new. Every victory reveals a weakness you can exploit later. Every death becomes a lesson for the living." Vexstar's form coiled with tension. "We analyzed your military communications from the Kepler battle. Do you know what your commanders were doing while their forces were being decimated?" "Fighting back," James suggested grimly, taking notes. Vexstar's eyes blazed brighter. "Your officers were recording everything. Every tactic we used, every weapon deployment, every strategic decision. They were treating their own annihilation as a learning experience." Maria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's failing life support. They were gathering intelligence for the next battle. Yes. And when that next battle came, you were ready. You had adapted our tactics, improved upon them, and turned them against us. What should have been a decisive victory became a costly stalemate. Vexstar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "That was when we realized we weren't fighting an enemy. We were fighting evolution itself." The observation deck shuddered as something massive impacted the outer hull. Through the reinforced windows, Maria could see the distant flashes of energy weapons fire. The rescue fleeter execution squad, she wasn't sure which, had arrived in overwhelming force. "How do you fight evolution?" she asked. "You don't adapt to it, or you become extinct." Vexstar's 6 eyes focused on her with laser intensity. "But there's something else you need to understand. Something that changes everything." The station's lights flickered again, and Maria realized they were running out of time. Whatever Vexstar was about to reveal, it might be the last thing any of them ever learned. "What is it? The child who disabled our mechs at Kepler Station? We captured her after the battle. Do you know what she said when we asked her why she fought?" Maria shook her head, afraid to breathe. "She said someone has to. Not because she was brave, not because she was angry, not because she had a grand plan. Simply because someone had to, and she was there." As Vexstar's form seemed to glow with an inner light. "That is when we understood. You don't fight because you want to. You fight because you have to, and that makes you unstoppable." The station shook again, and Maria realized that humanity's greatest strength, its refusal to quit, was about to be tested once more. Just like compound interest, each small act of defiance was building into something that would reshape the galaxy forever. The station convulsed like a dying beast as explosions tore through its outer sections. Sparks cascaded from damaged electrical systems, and the smell of ozone and burning metal filled the air. Maria's tablet shattered as a piece of ceiling debris struck it, but she barely noticed. Her entire focus was locked on the alien, whose revelations were reshaping everything. She thought she knew about humanity's place in the cosmos. Explosions rocked the station as Vexstar continued, his voice taking on an almost academic tone despite the chaos. "We began to study human psychology. What we discovered challenged our entire understanding of warfare, of survival, of evolution itself." The contradiction was surreal. Here was an alien warrior discussing the finer points of interspecies behavioral analysis while his own people were literally blowing up the station around them. Maria found herself holding her breath as debris fell from the ceiling, each impact a reminder that they were living on borrowed time. Humans possess something we lack: the ability to choose principles over survival. When faced with extinction, most species either surrender or flee. Humans do neither. They fight harder. The words hit Maria like a revelation. She had always taken human stubbornness for granted, never considering it might be unique in the galaxy. "Make it sound like a curse," she said, her hands shaking as another blast shook the facility. "Perhaps it is." Vexstar's form rippled. With what Maria had learned to recognize as the alien equivalent of a shudder, we intercepted human communications during the siege of Mars colony. A human commander, knowing his position was hopeless, knowing his forces were outnumbered 50-1, sent a single message to his superiors: "We cannot win, but we can make them pay." The simplicity of those words sent chills down Maria's spine. No grand speeches, no desperate pleas for reinforcement. Just a cold calculation that defeat was inevitable and a determination to make it cost everything. "Think about that for a moment," James said, his voice tight with a mixture of pride and horror. 50-1 odds. And his first thought wasn't escape or surrender. It was revenge. Not revenge, Vexstar corrected. Something far more dangerous. Accountability. Your species has this concept that even in defeat, there must be consequences for those who caused it. This is not rational behavior. The station shuddered again, and Maria could hear the distant sound of hull plating being torn away. Through the observation windows, she could see the bright flashes of energy weapons, carving through the station's superstructure like a surgeon's scalpel. "Maybe rational is overrated," she said, surprised by her own defiance. The door burst open as Sergeant Robert Chen rushed in, his uniform scorched and his face streaked with soot. "Colonel, they've breached the outer hull. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they reach this sector." 10 minutes. Maria felt her stomach drop. 10 minutes to evacuate, to get to the escape pods, to have any chance of survival. But 10 minutes was also enough time to learn something that might change the course of history. James turned to Maria, his face grim. "We're evacuating now." "No," Maria said, surprising herself with her determination. "I need to hear the rest." "Are you insane?" James grabbed her arm. "We're talking about survival here. And I'm talking about understanding." Maria pulled free, her eyes never leaving Vexstar. "Don't you see? This is exactly what he's talking about. We're choosing knowledge over safety." Vexstar's eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "You would risk death for knowledge?" "Apparently," Maria said, and she could hear the echo of every human who had ever made that same impossible choice. "What happened at Mars colony?" The alien's form seemed to coil with remembered pain. "They held the line for 37 cycles. 37 cycles against impossible odds. They used every dirty trick, every desperate strategy, every suicidal tactic in their arsenal. When we finally breached their defenses, we found only 7 survivors out of 3,000. The numbers were staggering." Maria tried to imagine the horror of that battle, the desperation of those final moments. 7 out of 3,000? "Yes. And do you know what those 7 survivors were doing when we found them?" Vexstar's voice cracked. "They were rigging the colony's fusion reactor to explode. Even in defeat, even after everything they had endured, they were still trying to take us with them." "Jesus," James whispered. "They had one," Vexstar continued, his voice barely audible over the sounds of approaching destruction. "How could a defeat be a victory?" Maria demanded. "Because in those 37 cycles they had taught us fear, not the fear of death. We understand that. The fear of humans. The fear of a species that doesn't know when to quit." Vexstar's 6 eyes blazed with an intensity that made Maria step back. "After Mars colony, our military doctrine changed. We began calculating not just the cost of victory, but the cost of victory against humans specifically." The station lurched violently, and Maria had to grab the observation rail to keep from falling. Emergency klaxons wailed throughout the facility, and she could hear the distant sound of boots running on metal decking as the evacuation began. "What kind of cost?" she asked. Acceptable losses became unacceptable when applied to human conflicts. A battle that should have cost us a dozen ships began costing us hundreds. Planets that should have surrendered in days took months to pacify. And everywhere we fought you, we learned the same lesson, which was that humans don't just fight to win. They fight to ensure that winning costs their enemies everything they have. Vextor's form seemed to pulse with each explosion that rocked the station. We realized we weren't conquering you. We were being conquered by you, one battle at a time. Maria felt a surge of understanding that made her dizzy. You're saying we turned warfare into a form of compound interest? I do not understand that term, Vextor admitted. Small investments that grow over time? Every battle you won cost you more than the last. Every victory made the next one more expensive. Eventually, even winning would bankrupt you. Yes, Vextor said. And for the first time she heard something, like admiration in his voice. You weaponized mathematics itself. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into the eerie blue glow of the containment field. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the walls, and Maria realized they were down to the final minutes. There's something else, Vextor said urgently. Something you need to understand before they silence me forever. What? The retreat? From human space. It wasn't because we feared your military. It was because we feared what you would become if we kept pushing you to evolve. Maria felt her blood turn to ice. What do you mean? Every pressure we applied made you stronger. Every defeat taught you lessons. Every victory cost you less and cost us more. We realized we weren't fighting a war. We were participating in your species' evolution, and we were terrified of what we might create. The station shook one final time, and Maria realized their time was up. But as she looked at Vextor's 6 eyes, she understood that humanity's greatest strength, its refusal to quit, was about to compound into something that would reshape the galaxy forever. The emergency lighting cast haunting shadows across the observation deck as the station's power grid began its final death throes. Maria could taste metal and ozone in the air, the bitter flavor of a world coming apart at the seams. But even as everything collapsed around her, she couldn't look away from the alien whose words were reshaping her understanding of humanity itself. The containment field flickered as power fluctuated throughout the station. Maria realized this was more than a debriefing. This was a confession. The war changed us, Vextor said, his voice barely audible over the approaching sounds of combat. The alien's form seemed to contract with each word, as if the admission itself was causing physical pain. We, who had conquered the galaxy, began to experience something unknown in our history out. Every battle with humans, even those we won, cost us more than we had anticipated. Not just in resources or personnel, but in certainty. Maria felt, her heart racing as the implications sank in. What do you mean? We began to question our own nature. If humans, with their short lives and fragile bodies, could fight with such determination, what did that say about us? We, who had lived for centuries, who had built an empire across the stars, were we the inferior species? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Maria had spent her entire career studying alien biology, searching for signs of intelligence and sophistication that might surpass humanity's achievements. She had never considered that another species might be asking the same questions about humans. You're telling me that a galactic empire began having an existential crisis because of us? James asked, his voice carrying a note of dark humor. That's either the most flattering thing I've ever heard, or the most terrifying. Both, Vextor replied without hesitation. Maria felt a chill of understanding. You're afraid of us. Terrified, Vextor admitted, and the simple honesty of the statement hit her like a physical blow, because we realized something that changed. Everything. Humans don't fight to win, they fight to survive. And anything that fights to survive will eventually find a way to win. The station shuddered as another section of the hull gave way, and Maria could hear the distant sound of atmosphere. Venting into space? They were running out of time, but she had to know more. That's the difference, isn't it? She said. Pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. You fight to conquer. We fight to survive. Conquest has limits, but survival doesn't. Precisely. Vextor's 6 eyes blazed with an intensity that made Maria step back. We could calculate the cost of conquest, plan for acceptable losses, set parameters for victory. But how do you calculate the cost of fighting someone who will never stop? Trying to survive? The answer was simple and terrifying. You couldn't. Before Maria could respond, the door exploded inward as alien soldiers poured into the room. Their weapons were raised, their forms radiating the kind of controlled violence that spoke of professional military training. James raised his weapon, but Vexstar held up a hand. The prisoner commanded his own forces. Let them leave. The lead soldier's form rippled with what Maria was beginning to recognize as confusion. It spoke in the same musical tones as Vexter, but with an edge of authority that suggested high rank. They have heard too much, the soldier said, its voice carrying through the station's translation systems. No, Vexstar replied. They have heard exactly enough. Maria found herself standing her ground even as weapons were trained on her. The scientist in her was fascinated by this glimpse into alien military hierarchy, but the human in her was terrified of what those weapons might do. Is that why you withdrew? Maria asked, her voice steady despite the circumstances.
Because
You realized you couldn't win a war against survival itself? We withdrew because we finally understood what we were facing. Not just another species to conquer, but a species that would never stop fighting, never stop adapting, never stop becoming more than what they were. Vexter's form seemed to pulse with each word. In our arrogance, we thought we were teaching humans about war. Instead, you taught us about terror. The alien soldier moved closer, its weapons still trained on Maria. Enough. We leave now. But Vexstar wasn't finished. His 6 eyes fixed on Maria with an intensity that made her step back. Tell me, human, knowing what you now know about your own species, knowing what you are capable of when pushed to the edge, are you not afraid of yourselves? The question hit Maria like a sledgehammer. She thought about the stories Vexstar had told, about humans who chose death over surrender, about children who turned household appliances into weapons, about commanders who calculated revenge, even in defeat. She thought about a species that had weaponized mathematics itself, that had turned warfare into a form of compound interest, where every battle made them stronger and their enemies weaker. Maria stared at the alien prisoner, and for the first time since the interrogations began, she had no answer. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications that neither species might be ready to confront. Finally, the alien soldiers moved to escort Vexstar away, their forms tense with the urgency of their mission. As the rescue party led Vexstar away, he turned back one final time. Remember this, Dr. Rodriguez. We came to conquer you. Instead, you conquered something far more valuable, or certainty. The galaxy will never be the same. The words echoed in the observation deck long after the aliens had left. James helped Maria to her feet as the station's emergency systems sealed the breach. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the alien fleet already beginning to withdraw, their mission complete. What did he mean? James asked, his voice subdued. Maria looked out at the stars, understanding finally dawning. He meant we've already won. We just don't know it yet. In the distance, the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with them the most dangerous weapon humanity had ever created, the knowledge that even the most powerful empire in the galaxy could be made to blink first. But as Maria watched them go, she couldn't shake Vexstar's final question. Were humans afraid of themselves? Should they be? The answer, she realized, would determine not just humanity's future, but the future of every species in the galaxy. Because if humans truly were what Vexstar claimed, a species that turned every defeat into a lesson, every battle into evolution, every challenge into an opportunity to become something more, then the galaxy was about to discover what compound growth looked like when applied to an entire civilization. Just like compound interest, humanity's potential was about to reshape everything, one calculated risk at a time. The end.